Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating essay by the author Su Feng, and we're going to tackle something practically all of us have wrestled with. You know the feeling, right? You consume endless self-improvement content, you read philosophy, you set these incredibly high moral standards for yourself, and yet the second you hit the friction of everyday life, those ideals just crumble. Well, Su Feng actually calls this the practitioner's confusion, and his breakdown of exactly why this happens, and more importantly, how we can actually fix it, is a total game changer. So let's jump right in and figure out why our best intentions fall apart when they don't have the right framework holding them up.
To kick things off, let's talk about a super relatable story the author shares. Back in 2008, Chef Feng hired a local woman to help out with housework in Zimbabwe. Now, she was chosen primarily for one specific reason. She went to church every single week. It makes total sense, right? You figure someone completely immersed in a moral, religious environment is going to have pretty solid character. But reality hit. When she was left completely unsupervised to look after a neighbor's house, she actually ended up stealing from them. All that moral education she was getting every Sunday, it just vanished the second she was alone in a different environment.
The author sums up this whole dynamic with this one absolutely brilliant quote. This is being noble when entering the church, but absurd when leaving it. I love that phrasing because it's so sticky and it perfectly nails the massive, super frustrating gap between our theoretical virtues and how we actually behave. Inside the safe, structured walls of a church, sure, the ideals hold up beautifully, but the second those walls are gone, the behavior completely flips. And honestly, this isn't just about one houseworker making a mistake. It is a massive mirror held right up to human nature.
Because this isn't just an individual slip-up. This scales all the way up to a societal level. Just look at the historical shift with Chinese officials. The author brings up this incredibly stark impartial example. You had officials who spent decades being heavily educated in Maoist philosophy. And while Mao was alive and that very specific social structure was strictly enforced, they genuinely acted as the people's servants. But then, the era ended, the strict structure was pulled away during economic reforms, and bam, their behavior flipped entirely. They became the people's masters, taking bribes and neglecting their duties. The exact same moral education, but a totally different environment.
Which brings us right back to that quote. It perfectly applies to those officials too. Decades of intense, rigorous moral training just evaporated into thin air once their environment shifted. It's solid proof that simply knowing what's right or being constantly taught what's right doesn't actually sustain your behavior when the world around you changes.
And you can see this playing out historically in these massive, recurring waves of spiritual cultivation in China. Think about it. Decades ago, the wave was Maoist philosophy. Fast forward a bit, maybe 15 years ago, and suddenly everyone was obsessed with Western spirituality and figures like Osho. Then we saw this huge push to restore traditional culture, where people were packing into lecture halls, feeling like they were all on the verge of becoming saints. And today? Well, today it's social media gurus. But here is the crazy part. Every single one of these movements followed the exact same boom and bust cycle. The author describes it perfectly. They're like waves washing onto the beach and pulling back without leaving a single footprint. The second people stepped out of those glowing lecture halls and into the real world, they were slapped right back to their original shapes.
And man, today, it is all over our feeds. The author points out that online spiritual masters are emerging like crucian carp crossing rivers, which basically means they are swimming in massive, thick schools across our screens. They set up their little ring lights, acting deeply serious, preaching as if they are the only sober ones left while the rest of the world is completely drunk. They'll talk so eloquently about love, awakening, Taoism, emptiness, and you know what? It sounds amazing. It feels like profound, life-changing insight. But just like those old lecture halls, these gorgeous digital concepts burst like soap bubbles the absolute second they hit the harsh friction of your daily commute or a stressful workday.
So we hit what Su Feng calls the practitioner's confusion. It's this deeply frustrating reality that no matter who you are, you can spend literal decades learning, reading, meditating, and preaching, but at the end of the day, you're standing in the exact same place. You still have the same constant worries. You definitely haven't entered any sort of spiritual Elysium world. You've consumed endless amounts of spiritual content, yet your fundamental anxieties are entirely unchanged.
So what gives? If all this education and endless digital preaching isn't actually moving the needle, what is the missing piece of the puzzle here? Why do we keep touching the sky for a brief second, only to fall right back down to earth? This is exactly the central mystery the author is trying to unravel.
Well, enter the author's big game changer, program construction. This is the crucial paradigm shift. Program construction is basically the creation of a highly engineered life program or environment. and it's designed specifically to sustain moral behavior and act as a shield, protecting people from the sheer cruelty of reality. The author is arguing that building this supportive environment is vastly more important than just giving someone a moral lecture. Think of it like a computer. You can't just keep upgrading the software. Eventually, you have to build the physical hardware that can actually run it.
It's a complete shift in how we look at self-improvement. On one hand, we have moral education. Human history is literally overflowing with people seeking sainthood, right? Trying to just learn and memorize their way into perfection. But then, on the other hand, we have program construction. This is the missing piece. Because seeking sainthood, that's the easy part. Maintaining it continuously, that's practically impossible, unless you have a systemic protective framework built all around you. Relying on raw willpower is just a losing game.
And the author actually brings the receipts to back this up. Over the span of about 10 years, nearly 100 people achieved the actual qualities of sages and saints. How? Through a specific program created in 2009 called the New Oasis for Life. This wasn't a book club, it was an entire program built strictly around the concept of creating a protective, fully supportive environment for everyone inside it. And the truly incredible part? These weren't elite scholars or lifelong monks who had spent decades meditating on mountaintops. They were everyday farmers with only a basic school education. Yet, because they were living within this incredibly structured, supportive program, they were able to live beautifully, like celestials, as the author puts it. It is ultimate proof that deep spiritual and moral success isn't about memorizing advanced theories. It is entirely about existing in a space that actively supports and normalizes the exact behavior you want to achieve. So bringing it all the way back to our houseworker from the very beginning. If she had been kept continuously inside a structured, church-like program, she never would have developed the heart to steal in the first place. The environment itself would have simply removed the conditions that allowed the theft to happen. But the minute she was thrown out into unstructured reality, she compromised. The core lesson? Human behavior is wildly, incredibly responsive to the immediate container it's placed in. Because at the end of the day, a constructed life program does three crucial things. First, it completely removes the soil and conditions for corruption. No opportunity, no problem. Second, it stops us from making those instant, easy compromises we all fall back on when real life gets too stressful. And third, it actively keeps people from just reverting back to their old default habits. Without these structural guarantees, Xu Feng argues that all your solitary, solo efforts are just going to get instantly beaten into a prison of trouble by how harsh reality actually is. So I'm going to leave you with a pretty provocative question to chew on today. Look at your own habits. Look at your own goals. Are your daily self-improvement efforts actually building a structured life program for yourself? Are you building an environment that protects your ideals? Or are you just endlessly consuming more content, chasing passing clouds and illusions that are just going to vanish the second life gets hard? Truly understanding this dynamic between what you learn and the environment you build could completely change how you approach your personal growth. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and I really hope this gives you a fresh, powerful framework for turning your ideals into an actual, lasting reality. See you next time.